This video is to show you how to extract PDF data using an invoice as an example. So I've went out to the internet and searched for a sample invoice, and I found this one that I've created here. So you can see just a generic invoice with a date, due date, invoice number, and then here's the description of the different items. So the goal of this flow will be to extract the overall amount that is due for each of these invoice lines into a data table that can be dropped into Excel. So the first thing we need to do for that is to extract the data from the PDF. So you can come over here, and the action you're looking for is extract text from PDF. And then I've just saved out in my Power Automate desktop files folder the sample invoice. So I'm going to go ahead and put the file path to the file I'm looking at there. In this instance, I'll extract all pages. Don't really need to worry about the advanced settings here. And I'm going to leave the variable produced as the extracted PDF text. So that'll go ahead and extract the data from the PDF. And if you want to see what the actual output of that is, you can do a display message and then just put here message to display would be the extracted PDF text. You don't need to do anything else. So if we go ahead and run this, we can see here this is the text that was extracted via the extract text from PDF action. So here's the information that I'm interested in. So really what you need to do is find the data that you want to extract and then look for consistent formatting or wording or spacing or kind of anything you can pull out that's consistent each time you're looking at the invoice. So you can use that to extract the data that you're looking for. So in this instance, we don't really need to see the display message every time. That's just to kind of show you what you're able to do. So I'll go ahead and disable that. So what I'm going to do now, though, is you'll notice here there's all these actions for text. So you can do all sorts of things. And so a lot of times when you're doing stuff like this, it's really a multiple step process. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and parse text. So I know that the text I want to parse is the output from my prior action, so this extracted PDF text. From looking at the message box, we know that the text that repeats itself is PAD video. So anytime I see PAD video, I know I'm going to want to extract the data after that comes up. So I'm going to start at 0. I want to do multiple because I know there can be multiple instances of that. So I'm going to uncheck the first occurrence only box, and I'm going to leave my variables as positions. So then I'll go ahead and click run. You can see here, if you double click on positions, I now have a list of numeric values where I have 3 different positions. What that means is I have 3 different instances on my invoice of that PAD video. So that is what I would expect. So now that I know the positions of the instances of PAD video, I'm going to start to plan for how I want to populate my table. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a data table, create new data table, and I'm going to say here I want this to be invoice line number, then I want column 2 to be the total amount. So we'll create that. And then I like to keep my row index consistent, so I'm going to go ahead and delete row from table, and I'm just going to delete from table I created, row index 0. So now when I start adding data, it's going to start adding it into row index 0 as I expect. So now the next thing I would want to do is think through how I have multiple locations that I know have the data that I want. So I know I'm going to have to do something multiple times. So in my instance, I'm going to go ahead and use a loop for that. And what I want to do is I want to start from 0. What I want to do is I want to end, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to end on positions, but I'm going to click on count and I'm going to say count -1. And the reason for that is that the first row in your data table is 0. So I need to basically be looking at my count -1 to be able to match up to the row that I want. And then each time I do it, I'm going to increment by 1. I'll leave the variable named loop index. So now I need to think through what I want to loop through for each of my positions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get subtext. and I'm going to drag that action in between the loop and the end. And I'm going to look at my original text, which is still my extracted PDF text. And I'm going to say, I want to go to a specific character position. So we can look here and we can see that we have this positions variable. And I can add to the end of this my loop index variable. And what that will do is that will pull the character position from the data table row that is applicable to my loop index. So for example, my first loop, the loop index is 0. So it's going to pull it from the 0 or the first row of that data table. And then I'm just going to go from there to the end of the text, and I'll click save there. Now if I run this, I can start to see how the data appears for each of the pad video instances. So what I'm going to do to get the total amount due is I'm going to take the amount per unit, which is this first amount here, and then I'm going to take the quantity, which is this number here, and I'm going to multiply these two together to calculate what the ending total is. You can really take multiple approaches here. This is just the one that I've chosen to show you, that you can do math with the variables that you pull out. So now what I'm going to do is I can see I need to crop my text because what I really care about is the data in between the two dollar signs. So now my original text, I'm going to start looking at the subtext, which is the subset that I've already started working with. So now I can say, okay, with that subtext, I want you to give me the values between the dollar signs. And then my variables here, rather than crop text, I'm just going to overwrite subtext, and I don't need an indicator if a flag was found or not. So now I'll run. So if I click into my subtext here, I can see that this is starting to be just the data that I care about. So I can see here, this is the amount per unit, and then this is the quantity. So I can say, okay, I know in this instance that I'm going to have the amount per unit is going to be before a space in this text, and the quantity is going to be after a space. So from looking at that, I know I'm going to need to crop my text again. So I'm going to say, I want to look at my subtext, and I want to get text before the specified flag. The flag, as we saw, is a space. To look at a space in Power Automate Desktop, you can do %, single quote, space, single quote, %. In this instance, I still don't need is flag found, so I'm going to uncheck that. But for my variable, I'm going to make this say amount and click save. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm going to say I want to get the text after the specified flag. Again, using subtext as my original text. So I'm going to do %, single quote, space, single quote, %, and I want to do a variable called quantity this time. So now what's going to happen is this is going to, if I run this, you'll see I have, for my third row, I can see that I have a quantity of 1 and an amount of 2,500. As a best practice, I typically will do this trim text action on my variables. So I'll just do that for both of these. So I'm going to say amount. I want to trim the white space before and after, and then I'm going to output this as an updated amount. And then same for my quantity. So I'm going to use quantity, remove space before and after, and then I'm going to override it as quantity. And the other thing you'll notice here is this variable is a text variable, but I want it to be a number because I'm going to do math. So I'm also going to use this text action of convert text to number. So I'm going to drag this here, and I'm going to say I want you to convert amount to a number and output it as amount. And then I'm going to do the same thing here for quantity. So I'm going to choose my quantity variable, and then I'm going to have it output as a number named quantity. So now I have two numeric variables, and as I mentioned before, the way that I'm going to calculate the total amount due is I'm going to do the math of multiplying the amount per unit by the quantity. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to set a variable, and I'm going to call this total amount due. And the value here is going to be my amount variable times my quantity variable. So I'm just gonna put that there. Then if I go ahead and run this, you can see here for my total amount due, I now have 2,500, which is what we'd expect for that third position. So now what I need to do is populate my data table for each of the instances that I have. So I'm going to say insert row into data table, drag this down to the bottom. The data table is just called data table. I'm going to say before the row index, my row index would be my loop index. And then if you recall, the two columns that we had in our data table were the invoice line number and the total amount due. So I just need to put what I want to populate in the table. So I'm going to put that I want to populate the loop index. But you'll recall my loop index started with 0, and I want to list this as the invoice row. So I'm going to do loop index plus 1 so that I end up with a count of 1, 2, 3 rather than 0, 1, 2. And then I also want to populate the total amount due variable in the total amount due. So then I'm just going to add brackets here as required and click save. So that's the entirety of the flow. So I'll go ahead and click run. You can see it's going to loop through that loop 3 times. Now I can come out and click on data table, and you'll notice here I have 3 different rows. So I have invoice line 1, 2, 3. The total amount due is 2,000, 1,500, and 2,500. If I come back to my invoice, I've got 1, 2, 3. Total amount due is 2,000, 1,500, and 2,500. So this shows you that you can extract invoice data from a PDF, and as long as you can find consistencies in the text, which is pretty common if you're looking at an invoice from a specific vendor or supplier. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please click like and subscribe, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.